Hello guys, as always, thanks for tuning in. Jay Helmsing here. Today we're going to be doing a comparison video, which as you might know is kind of uncommon for me, but I've had several requests to do this video. So we'll get into that here in just a few moments, but I will tell you beforehand, reason I typically don't do comparison videos is because they oftentimes turn into circuses in the comments. Now that's perfectly fine if you want that to go on down there, but this channel, I kind of started this to have more of a positive spin, positive outlook on things. I really don't need the negativity. There's tons of that out there. So that's kind of my take on this. And, I will tell you up front, you can't go wrong with either one of these pistols. They're both winners. If you prefer one over the other, rock on. I can see why you would do that. But again, this is just going to be my take, my opinion on this. And I'm just one guy. I've got some military experience. I've got law enforcement experience. I've got some competitive shooting experience. But there are probably people out there more qualified than I am. And that's cool. But we'll just kind of take it for what it's worth. So two things I will say before we start this. Again, number one, don't take this too seriously, because I definitely don't take myself too seriously. Just build your opinion by getting other, points of view and kind of combining those, and then, putting your own 2 cents in and take it from there. And secondly, let's try to keep it positive, not because I can't handle it or anything like that, but because, I started this channel as more of a positive sort of outreach, and I really think we have something in common. If you're tuning into this, I think we're all kind of gun people, and we've got that going for us. And we need to, more than ever probably now, we need to find some common ground. We need to unite. We need to, be on the same page and kind of put our differences aside. So now that that's out of the way, we're going to get on with the show. But again, thanks for tuning in. Let's let the guns do the talking now. Let's take a look at the two contenders. We have CZ's P-07. This one's in OD green, kind of a catchy little number here. And we have the compact carry PX4 Storm by Beretta that was tailored by Ernest Langdon of Langdon Tactical. So we'll get into that here in just a few moments. We'll be using the REAP system to evaluate these two pistols. And for those of you that are unfamiliar, it's going to be R is going to be the reliability, E is for ergonomics, A is going to be accuracy, of course, and P for price. So we'll be looking at those 4 different areas of this, and just then kind of comparing, and I'll give you guys my take at the end here, because they are similar pistols, but they're very different in some ways as well. So let's start with reliability with both of these pistols. So very important to note that this is a newer P-07. So there have been some changes made to the model line, and it does kind of come into the reliability aspect, if you ask me, because with some of the older P-07s, I've had about 5 of them so far. With some of the older P-07s, the chamber right in here is very tight, and it is not the case on this gun. I don't know if they've changed it in the model line, or if I got super duper lucky and got one with a more of a loose barrel. But the chamber is very tolerable right now, especially in this gun, to different bullet profiles. Now, one of the reliability aspects before, I would say, would probably be the older style of this, P-07, P-09, having that tight chamber and not really liking some reloaded bullets. So there have been probably a handful of times, maybe 5-10 times, where I've had one of these lock up completely or fail to go into battery or something like that, because it didn't like the profile of the bullet that I was reloading with. And as you guys can see, I reload a lot. It's really the only way I can afford to do this sort of thing. But, so for me, that was kind of a big deal. I would take this out, and maybe I would use like factory ammunition if I was going to shoot competition with it, because with factory profiles, these seem pretty good. But with those reloads, sometimes you get some iffy ones here and there, and they just didn't like them. It's just a very tight chamber, and they would, have some issues kind of choking on that. And it was a well-known problem. So I feel like CZ has changed that, because with this gun, I've got about 500 rounds in it, and most of those being reloads, and I've not had a single issue. So to me, that tells me that they have done something to change this chamber. So that's worth noting, that this is a newer gun, and I believe there are some changes that have been made to make these a little bit more reliable and specifically more tolerable to reloaded ammunition or specific bullet profiles. I'm not sure if they kept the rifling from going back as far, or if they actually changed the dimensions in here, but there is a difference that I can tell with the way this gun feeds ammunition. So with reliability, the P-07, this is a tried and tested design. It's based on the CZ75, and that's really all you need to say. Just a rock solid, stable platform. I've really never had any failures or anything like that. You kind of have to watch this little pin right here. If you do a lot of dry firing, that pin can snap. Obviously some replacement things out there. Now, as far as the internals and mechanics go, there are some little springs and things here and there, but under normal shooting conditions, you should never really have to worry about those things breaking or failing. And there are some upgrades out there, but they're a little bit more intensive than other guns. So if you want to really like change the pull weight and, you know, kind of Cajuниze this with Cajun parts, you're going to be changing a whole bunch of little things in here, including the striker or the firing pin itself. It's going to need to be a longer version. So it's pretty in-depth to make some, you know, some worthwhile changes to the gun. So I guess that's worth noting. The design is just, you know, really robust, really good the way it is. And if you're really not too crazy on putting a whole bunch of aftermarket stuff in there, it's kind of going to be the way it comes out of the box as far as pull weights and things like that with this design. But very reliable, very good to go out of the box. PX4, rotating barrel design, which is kind of unique, but it has proven to be a very reliable design. Maybe a few less parts moving and things like there. You just have kind of the lug in here that moves it, and this, you know, kind of rotating as opposed to, you know, actually dropping the barrel and things like that. So, you know, the recoil profile being just a little bit different, maybe a little less muzzle rise. It's definitely not like a low recoil gun or anything like that. You still feel the recoil. It just stays a little bit more flat. But it's also a very, very reliable design. If you don't believe me, you can ask Ernest Langdon, who just rang the snot out of one of these last year. I believe he used the full-size version, but it was, you know, the rotating barrel design, just to kind of show how robust it is. This gun here, you can just basically take the whole thing apart with a few pins. It's very simply designed, very elegantly designed as far as the internals go and everything like that. And if you want to change the pull weight, you can just drop a different spring in there like you can with most other guns, and you're good to go. Again, P-07, you can drop a spring in there, but then you've got to look at the spring up here that goes on the striker, maybe changing that out as well to kind of balance the two out. If you really want to get in and kind of remove some of the grit that these guns are known for, you'll be changing little roller bearings and things like that. Not really the case with this. So pretty simple design, very robust design. Really, both of them, I'm going to say they're tied as far as reliability because they're both pretty good designs, and they've both been tested and proven to be effective and robust. So there's my take on that. Let's look next at ergonomics. We'll switch this up. We'll just have this go up first because I'm going to point out ergonomics are very, very good with this gun. This has a more up and down grip profile, but it doesn't really come out in pointing. You know, I don't seem to point this any differently than other guns. Now there are some tweaks on this, and I will kind of point these out. I did go with a bobbed hammer, so that was something that I added. I also went with the decockers on here that are the newer version that have this kind of lip instead of the stealth decockers this came with. Other than that, it's a very streamlined gun, and it was designed to be that way for concealed carry. Really not a whole lot to knock on it. The ergonomics, it feels very good in your hands. This beaver tail is nice. It fits, you know, just basically perfectly on the webbing of my hand without being obtrusive or, you know, showing itself in carry or anything like that. Nice undercut here. You know, this is really grippy here. The one thing I will ding it on, these are completely slick underneath these grips, so you really have to put some of these rubberized grips or something like that on there, and I really don't feel like you should need to do that. You know, it's a problem that Beretta knows is out there, and hopefully they're working on a fix. I have heard that they may be releasing maybe a Gen 2 version of this or a newer version with maybe some different grip texture, so that would be a welcome addition. But as far as the other ergonomics go, really nothing to complain about here. Very nice gun. Everything's well within reach. You know, as far as all of your controls and things like that. Nice extended mag release. The magazine well itself, very slick, very easy to feed up in there. Pretty good ergonomics. Really can't complain about that. Take a look at the P-07 next. CZ known for its ergonomics. It just kind of melts in your hand. It fits your hand very, very nicely. Again, a nice undercut here. You're not going to have that Glock knuckle or anything. You have a nice cut here that helps to kind of plant it in your hand. You've got some very nice texturing on the sides here, maybe a little bit too aggressive for some carry conditions, but you know, you can always sand that down if it's not really your thing. Have some nice kind of horizontal siping on the front and rear here. Really lock this gun in your hand well, and of course CZs with that low bore axis just kind of sitting there nice and low. Now that is kind of you know, one of the features of this gun. It does help kind of manage recoil with the gun. It is going to have a little bit more pronounced recoil because it is a tilt design, you know, the tilting barrel modified Browning design, as opposed to the you know, completely horizontal rotating barrel you're going to have with the P04, or excuse me, PX4. But you know, take that for what it's worth. So some slight changes there. Decockers are kind of in a nice location. They don't seem to get in the way. They are ambidextrous with the Omega system. You get a nice, generous mag release here. It'd be really hard to miss. Magazine well is kind of beveled there. Easy to feed your magazines up in there. Everything looks pretty good on this gun. The one thing I will point out is, just like most CZs, this slide release here, if you don't have long thumbs, it may be a little bit difficult to actuate, especially if you have shorter thumbs. But What you may want to do is go into get yourself into a habit of actuating that with your offhand. That may be one of the workarounds for that, or you can always come over the top and activate it that way. Somebody like me with longer thumbs, I really don't have an issue with it, but I did think it's worth pointing out. So as far as ergos go, tough to really pick one or the other, but I would say that the PX4 probably has a slight advantage, not just because everything seems to be in a little bit better location, but also because of the slide height. So if you look at this, even though the bore axis is nice and low on the CZ, you have a little less real estate to kind of manipulate in an emergency or something like that, whereas you have a nice tall slide on this PX4, so a little bit more conducive to doing those manipulations on. Just, little things here and there, but I would say probably PX4 having the edge just a little bit on ergos, just in my opinion at least. We'll look next at accuracy. Well, let's just do it this way. I shot both of these targets today with these pistols, same ammunition, and the way that I shot them was I shot 20 rounds, 5 rounds at a time, one alternating to the other, and then I also shot the first round with the hammer down. So the first round is going to be double action in both of these. This was about 12 yards, so looks like there's some glare over there, but P-07 right here, and you have the PX4 right here. This was shot at the end of a long range session, so I was a little bit out of focus, but this is basically, these are the results here. And you can notice the P-07 grouping a little bit better than the PX4, at least for me. I kind of have this funky looking, snake trail here, and I do have a couple flyers. I know for sure the flyers were sent out for me, just not paying attention, just having some bad shots. So, take that for what it's worth. The overall spread's about 3.5 inches on both of these offhand, which isn't too terribly bad. For being at the end of a range session. So pretty comparable overall. Now I will point out something here. We got a nice tight group here with this P-07, so that's probably what you want to see. Looking a little bit odd over here with the PX4, but this was for me basically chasing the sights. So we'll kind of get into a comparison here in a minute with the sights. But with the PX4, you've got two things working against you. First off, it's a very short sight radius, and I'll point that out in just a moment. Secondly, you have these really nice AmeriGlow cap type sights, at least on the front. What that does is it allows you to pick it up very quickly for short range, quick acquisition shots or transition shots. But for more accurate shooting like this, it tends to wash out that front edge for me. So it's a little bit harder for me to kind of find that edge repeatably. And sometimes I'll end up chasing the sights like this, where I'll just kind of move it maybe a little bit and try to figure out where that sight should be placed. So that's what this was caused by, a combination of a short sight radius and also me kind of chasing the sights a little bit. So let's look at that sight radius and compare these two here. So if you look at them side by side, and we'll do a comparison at the end, but here's what we're looking at with sight radius. So PX4 on the top, P-07 on the bottom. We're looking at about 5¼ inch or so with the sight radius on the PX4 versus 6 inches sight radius with the P-07. And both of these, by the way, are less sight radius than you're going to get with like a Glock 19. So I'll kind of try to triple stack this if I can, get it even close to it. It's going to be about as close as I can get it, I think. But you see it right there. So these, the PX4 compared to the Glock 19, you're talking a lot shorter sight radius there. And again, a shorter barrel, which may affect some of the, the projectiles you're shooting, their capabilities and so on may even be altered because you're looking at a 4-inch barrel versus a 3.25-inch barrel. But we're talking sight radius right now. And again, good for picking that sight up quickly. You can definitely pick the sight up very quickly because of that short sight radius. But as far as precise, long-range shots, things like that, it takes a little more skill with this gun because you don't have all that room and that margin for error. We'll take a look at those sights next. Really, really awesome sights. However, you see how bright that front is. It's just a gigantic like square of orange. And for me, it just kind of washes out that top edge, which makes it a little bit difficult when you're taking those really, really precise shots. Now, this gun was not made to be like a long-range target pistol or anything like that, so that's not really something to compare. But I will say that, this is a little bit less accurate probably than you're going to get out of like a P-07, at least at distance and slow fire and things like that. Now, as far as picking up targets quickly, running a plate rack or something, you're not going to have any problem at all with this. I'd say they're probably pretty close. And I will point out that I did change the sights on this P-07. These are going to be night vision sights, and this is a much more conducive sight picture for me. Again, you got a blacked out rear like you do with the PX4, but I really like this kind of lemon lime color in the front. It just doesn't wash out as much for me, and it's more of a, it's a large dot, but it is a dot, which allows me to see the top of that just a little bit easier for more precise shooting. So again, with the sight radius combined with the sights that I prefer a little bit better, that's why the groups looked a little bit different. So both of them are more than adequate. Both of them are very acceptable for a carry pistol and things like that. But I would say accuracy-wise, you know, I'm going to have to give the edge to CZ. They're just known for having very accurate guns, very accurate barrels and so on, very good lockup. And again, you know, got that longer sight radius. So for those more difficult shots, things like that, that's where my money would go, is going to be on the CZ P-07. Now, we'll take a look at the last factor here, which is going to be obviously price. Now, this is going to be hard for some of you guys to believe if you haven't researched these two pistols. This gun, the PX4 compact carry, is a phenomenal gun. Fantastic, probably one of the best hammer-fired polymer pistols out there that you can buy. And the price reflects that. This bad boy is about $800. So I've seen them from $750 to maybe $850. So you figure in your sales tax, things like that, you're looking at about $800 for this gun. That's tough to swallow. It really is, because your standard PX4s, they go really cheap. I've seen them from $350, $400, things like that. And you can just kind of throw those parts in as you need that are added onto this gun. There's nothing unique completely about this gun. But it just has a lot of upgrades added to it already. Now you're going to be pretty much in the ballpark. I think you're actually saving some money if you were to get all the upgrades that this gun has and try to do it yourself. You're probably money ahead buying it already like that. But with that said, you know, that's a lot of money to spend on like a carry gun. And it's really, technically, it's over my limit. I like to stay below $600 with a carry gun. And the reason is because if I have to use that in a defensive use of force situation, it's going to be confiscated. It's going to be taken from me. More than likely put into evidence. It's going to be, you know, at the will of the court, and then it's going to be released to me whenever the court is done with it, or whenever the police department's done with it. $800 gun would be kind of tough for me to swallow. It'd be tough for me to be without you know, for a certain amount of time and things like that. So that's something to think about. You know, I'm not really a big fan of carrying around a $1,000 gun or, you know, carrying around a $600 gun for a carry piece. I think the gun that you carry should be something that's pretty everyday. Pretty easily replaceable, and definitely within that budget margin for you. Now, with that said, you do get a pretty fantastic gun for $800. So, But then if you look at this P-07, this thing here cost me $410, and that was with factory night sights, which I did change out. I don't really care for the factory night sights, but night sighted gun, $410. Deal of the century right there. I mean, this is it's going to be hard to go wrong with a gun this cheap and this good. So take that for what it's worth. You know, this one is costing twice as much, and this one costing, you know, half as much. There's really not much of a comparison in price there. I would say you're not getting twice as good for twice the amount of money with the PX4, and I love this gun, but that's the fact of the matter there. This is the best bang for the buck bargain coming or going. This is just a fantastic gun. A lot of good guns out there, pretty cheap nowadays, but this is a heck of a deal for, you know, $400 or whatever you're going to pay for it. And again, I don't know why anybody's out there buying like these, you know, Jimenez arms or, you know, high points or whatever. Just save your money for another week or two and buy one of these. I mean, there's just no excuse to have a cruddy gun nowadays. So take that for what it's worth. I think price-wise, this definitely wins. There's just no comparison there. So we're going to look next at some other things. We're going to look at comparison between the two of them, some weights, some trigger pulls, things like that. And I'll kind of get into which one I like better, which maybe might surprise some of you. I don't know. So let's take a look first. Comparison side by side. The P-07 being a little bit longer in the snout area. So if I can get them lined up as closely as possible here, you're going to notice that. A little bit longer in the snout area. Also going to have maybe a little bit more pronounced beaver tail. So as far as concealed carry, the PX4 probably being a little bit better for that aspect. A little more streamlined, a little shorter muzzle, things like that. A little bit easier to conceal, especially if you go with a spurless hammer here like I have. But overall height is pretty much the same. So these both hold 15 rounds. You can get the 16 round mags for the older 16 round mags for the P-07. But both of them, you know, comparable with that. They're pretty close in dimensions there, with the PX4 being too many P's going on. PX4 being a little bit smaller. As far as weight goes, we'll get this zeroed out here. And PX4 empty magazine in the gun is going to weigh in 1 pound 11 ounces. P-07 empty magazine in the gun, 1 pound 11.8 ounces. So 0.8 difference between the two. You're not going to notice that. They're essentially the same weight, although, you know, this being a little bit longer, a little bit bigger of a gun. Pretty much the same as far as dimensions go. Not really too much to talk about there. Let's take a look at the comparison with the old standby Glock 19. So there's the PX4 with the Glock 19, and you see that sight radius I was talking about, but also a smaller gun. It is going to be basically same height again, but a smaller gun. Both of them are pretty streamlined, but PX4 being a little bit smaller there than your Glock 19. Comparing these two, these are essentially identical if you line them up. So try to get my hands out of the way and get these lined up because the decockers are keeping that from happening. It's about as close as we can get it, I think. But as you guys can see, very close as far as that dimension goes. So that's the dimensional differences there. Let's take a look at trigger pull now. So double action on this P-07 is going to be from the half cock position, because when you decock these, it goes to that half cock position there. So let's take a look at the double action trigger pull here on the CZ. Double action first pull, 9.5 pounds, not too bad. So we'll get this all set up again in that position. Double action again, just to be sure, we're looking at about 9 pounds. So 9 pound double action pull, right around that with the CZ P-07 double action pull with this compact carry. First one is just under 9 pounds, about 8.5 pounds. And second, we've got just over 8 pounds. So I'd say about 8.5 pounds or so. So a little bit lighter double action pull in this Beretta here. Now single action. Set both of these up here. Single action in the P-07. First one is 4 pounds. And let's do a check. And second, right at 4 pounds. Okay. Single action in the Beretta. 4.5 pounds. And let's do one to check. Second is going to be also 4.5 pounds. So slightly lower double action, a slightly heavier single action in this Beretta. Now here is where they differ again. So double action in this P-07 is, again, not too heavy, but it stacks and it is gritty. And this is really not too bad of a trigger. I felt worse in these guns. You know, reset, single action. So if we were to have my take on this, I would say double action is gritty and it stacks pretty pronounced, which is known. It's just an issue with these CZ triggers unless you really get them worked on. They're just kind of gritty until you really just shoot the snot out and get everything worn in. Single action is, very light, but it's also kind of vague. So it doesn't come to a really pronounced wall. It comes to kind of this mushy little wall, and then you can break it from there. Not hard to shoot. It's just not a real clean break in single action, although it is very light. So, kind of take it for what it's worth. The trigger is just not as good in this as you're going to get out of that PX4 Storm. But it is light. It is very serviceable. They have short reset kits and things you can do, but again, it requires quite a lot of parts to be changed. Reset is about the same on these guns, and it's hard to explain. It comes out a little bit further, and then you're going to kind of catch that reset, and then you come back in almost more slack you're taking out until you get to that wall for single action. So both of these guns do that, and reset's about the same. It's pretty much the same or very close to what you get with like a Glock trigger. So that's the P-07 trigger. Now this Beretta trigger is just smooth as glass in double action. I mean, there's just really no comparison. It is completely smooth, even though it's a little bit lighter, I think, than we were getting out of that CZ, if I remember right. They're pretty comparable, but it's very, very smooth. It feels a lot lighter just because it's so smooth, and there's really none of that grittiness or anything in it. So we'll have the reset here. Reset is pretty much the same on both guns. and it's audible and you can feel it. And then single action being a little bit stiffer on this gun, but it's got a very, very clean wall there and a very clean break when it comes through that. So, you know, it's kind of a trade-off here. A little bit more weight, but a very predictable wall as opposed to the P-07. I would say trigger-wise, I would definitely go with the PX4 for the trigger, you know, just out of the box. Now, if you had this worked on and sent off and things like that, it may be a different story. So, we'll kind of wind this up just with my take on both of these guns, because I think that's about as much as I can compare both of them. I'm going to say, just overall, my personal favorite out of these two, if I were to pick one to carry, believe it or not, is going to be the PX4. Basically because of the ergonomics, the smaller size of it, and that fantastic, fantastic trigger. It's just, I really, really, really like the trigger, and I really like the way the gun shoots and things like that. Now, the P-07, I would not hesitate to carry this gun as well. Just a little bit larger. You also have, you know, that kind of gritty trigger. It's just not as grin-inducing, if you will, as the PX4, and it has just a little bit more snap to it. Even though it's got a low bore axe, it's got just a little more snap to handle than the PX4 does because of that barrel. But again, you know, the trade-off with that, you got that little short, dinky little subcompact size barrel with this, maybe kind of running into some issues with velocity. Don't have that issue with this, so they're both winners. They're both winners. They really are. But if I were to have my pick, or, you know, pick one for daily carry, it would be this. I know it's pricey, but man, that trigger is just fantastic, and that's kind of the selling point for me. So anyway, if you get a chance, check out both these guns. I definitely wouldn't hesitate to check both of them back to back. As far as bargain of the year, here you go. Right here's the winner for that. No doubt about it. Both of them are fantastic guns. Thank you for tuning in. Please check out the Instagram account, Jay Helmsing. Also, like and subscribe and comment below if you have anything to add to this, if you have any questions or anything like that. And I will keep coming at you guys with product reviews, videos, and so much more for the new year. Thanks again for tuning in. This is Jay Helmsing. Remember to practice your craft and get better. Until next time.